How I'd like to start out, there's so many ways we can do this. I'd like to start out by getting a little bit of backstory from you on like how you got started in business and bring us back to Brainchild and your start.
Wow, you indeed read the story, Brainchild. Yeah, so like Simon Sinek said, Frank, people don't buy what you do and they buy why you do it. I want to tell you a little bit of why I do what I do. I grew up in a war-torn Vietnam. Daddy was in the military, fought alongside with the U.S. Army. He was captured in 1975 when I was 7 years old. We thought he was dead. And a year later, he came back home. First thing he said to me, touching my head, is, "Son, you need to leave the country. This is not the place for you to grow up." Frank, I was 8 years old. I had no idea what that meant.
Oh,
But for the next 11 years, I did nothing but try to escape. I didn't go to school. That's what I want to say. I grew up a street kid, bad boy, did nothing but go to school.
mhm.
Learned my first English word when I was 19 years old in a refugee camp. Met the love of my life. We met on a love boat, Lisa. We were completely opposite. I was like a bad boy. She was like so elegant, Frank. French, fluent in French, English, Chinese, Vietnamese. Like, how could you meet such a perfect human being? So she inspired me to study. And then when I was in a refugee camp, I had a dream. My American dream was to be a student, live the life of a student. So long story short, I graduated high school at the age of 23. Well, people finish their college or master degree. And then I earned my bachelor degree at UBC when I was 27. So education basically changed me. But that wasn't the story. I did not speak English, Frank. So nobody in my family went to college. I studied math instead because you don't need a lot of English to study math. So I had a math degree. I moved down to Seattle from Vancouver because he was from New York. So he moved to Seattle.
Mhm.
And then I couldn't get a job with a math degree. Wish I had a computer science, engineering, and all that. Nobody told me that. I was math related too. So when you push in a corner, what are you gonna do? Well, put up a sign, get a license agreement from Brainchild, and to the math. Before I knew it, it expanded. In 2010, we franchised the business. Before we know it, the guy who was illiterate, street kid growing up in the worst neighborhood in Vietnam, now the CEO of an education center. That was the short version of my story, Frank.
That is incredible. And your mom was an educator though, right? Back in
Yeah,
Vietnam?
ironically, my mom was a teacher, but I
Right.
just hated school
Yeah.
because back in the day, it was the communist propaganda. You really don't learn a lot of stuff, but like you kind of brainwash you.
Yeah. So when you came to America, so who did you stay with?
My wife, Lisa, moved from New York to Seattle. So when I first went to Canada in a little town. I'm not sure if you heard the town called Prince Rupert.
Okay. Oh, yes.
Yeah, yeah, small town, northern BC. My grandmother lived there. So my uncle and my grandmother sponsored me to this little town called Prince Rupert. And then I went to high school there. And I still remember I went to high school, counselor gave me a test. And then I found the test, of course, because I wasn't able to speak English. So they sent me to a community college. But I said, I don't want no college. I want to be a student, right? College is different, right? Because
Right.
I mean, individual. So a year later, I went back, I took the test and I passed. So I was like in high school for 1 year. So I was hanging around with all the high schooler. I didn't tell them I was 22 or 23. They thought I was a crazy 17. So I look pretty young.
Yeah, and you still look young. You do not look your age, and I won't give your age away.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. And I know I'm older than you, Frank.
Oh, what? 5 months, I think we said,
Okay,
right?
there you go, there
We're
you
the same
go.
age. We just gave it away.
Yeah, we just gave it away. All right.
So, okay, Hal. So I really want to kind of drill into how when you were with Brainchild, when the concept gets franchised. So bring me back to the story because you were working there, and if I recall, when you were there, you had left, right?
Yeah. Yeah, in Richmond.
You had left in Richmond, and then there was an opportunity for you to come back and actually buy the company, right, from the original founder?
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. The story is I saw a little note. I mean, in university, right? It's like the a job wanted with a little, a
Uh-huh.
lot of phone number. So I
Yeah.
peeled the phone number. I give a phone call, and I went there and I took the test and I passed. The next day, I went back and teach. And then I always have this entrepreneurial antenna up with me.
Mhm.
So it was in Richmond, British Columbia, and I was in UBC. It took me 45 minutes to an hour to get there by like 3 transfer. And then when I got there the first day, I was so impressed, Frank. They had probably hundreds of students. And back then I remember it was like 40 or $45 a month. It is
Mhm.
like 1993 maybe. And I came home and I did the math. And then I called up my girlfriend back then. I said, I found something I like to do. And then I was so excited. And I called my boss. Her name is Mary, still good friend. She said, Mary, I'm quitting. She said, why? You didn't like it? I love it. I said, why are you quitting? Because I want to do what you do. I'm not willing to work for you. This is my own word. She laughed. And then the next thing is she introduced me to her husband, who's Edmund, now also my good friend. By the way, we're going on a cruise together on
Oh,
Friday.
great.
Yeah. And then she said, well, the good news is this is a franchise. You can buy a franchise. And I said, then what's the bad news? The bad news is it's sold out in British Columbia. I said, okay, then what? Sorry. So 2 years later, I graduated from UBC
Hmm.
and I bought, back then it was in license, it was in franchise in the US, but we did a licensing agreement.
Okay.
So I bought the concept to Seattle like a month after I graduate. That's how I started. Right, could get a job either. Right, like
Right.
of course the first year, Frank, in franchising,
Oh,
the first year too, you basically didn't bring any money home. It
sure.
was rough, right? Any business, any franchise, it's hard to make money during the first 2 years, especially like the new concept, you know, in Seattle. There wasn't any tutoring back then, right?
Right.
25, 30 years ago.
So clarifications, when you were running the franchise, but this was different than you actually franchising Best in Class Education Center, right?
You are correct because I had the licensing agreement in 1995 to open the first location in Seattle, Washington. And then later on, I earned the right for the US to open. And then later on, I bought the licensing agreement. So I bought the entire branch out and then I franchised the business in 2010.
Okay. How did you afford to be able to buy it?
I could afford it. That's why I talked to my mentor, who's Edmund. I said, "Hey, could you?" He is the one who owned a couple locations in Vancouver.
Right.
We partner up,
Okay.
right? And I borrow money from my lovely sister. Anybody that I could talk to, and I call them up, and I negotiate an installment and everything, right? Try to get everything, a line of credit, whatever I can get to.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, how this is just incredible. The deck was absolutely, stacked against you. It's hard enough to start a business, but to go through what you went through as a child, to come into a country you don't even speak the language, there's so many challenges, and what a rags to riches story. That's beyond money. It's the resilience and the ability to do what you've done is just incredible. It really is.
Thank you,
So
Frank. Now, Frank, if
yeah,
you don't mind, let me go back a little bit. It is
please.
related to franchising. I think it helped a lot of the audience. So buying the licensing is a small piece of it, right? Of
Mhm.
course, I couldn't afford it. But after that, I have a vision and dream. I want to scale this. A lot of people don't know that, oh, like I'm going to franchise the business. But after I purchased the licensing agreement, I didn't know that it costs so much money to franchise a business, right? The operation menu,
Mhm.
the FDD, assemble a dream team, and all that. That's another hurdle, and I have to borrow, more money
Mhm.
to franchise the business, right? Because on a regular basis, there are a lot of people came to me like, oh, like I have this secret recipe from my grandmother, whether chicken wing or cookie.
Right.
I want to franchise my business. I said, well, do you have $250,000? Like, what? I thought I need $20,000 to franchise.
Oh, right.
No, it's not. 20,000 is not even enough to put an FTD together.
Exactly,
right?
exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you for tuning into the Emerging Franchise Brands podcast. For additional insights, guest applications, and to stay connected, visit us at efbpodcast.com. The Emerging Franchise Brands podcast is for entertainment purposes only, and the views expressed do not necessarily represent those of Emerging Franchise Brands, its host Frank Fumey, or Emerging Franchise Group LLC. Any discussed franchise or investment opportunity requires thorough investigation, obtaining proper disclosure documents, and expert consultation before making any investment decisions. The podcast and its host do not offer professional advice or endorsements, and they hold no responsibility for actions, representations, accuracy, or consequential damages related to the podcast content.